Welcome to the Livestock Record Keeping Training for all certified organic operations. This training will focus on ruminant animals, primarily for dairy and beef producers. This course will introduce the overarching regulatory requirements for record keeping in organic production, as well as the specific requirements for organic livestock producers. You will be provided with an overview of livestock records necessary for organic certification, as well as maintaining for inspection audits to verify compliance. Upon completion of this course, you will be able to define the requirements for organic livestock record keeping according to the relevant NOP livestock regulations, identify the specific types of records and documents that must be maintained for organic livestock operations, and understand the purpose and importance of each type of record, such as animal health records, feed records, pasture management logs. Record keeping is outlined in the regulation at 205103, which states the following. Certified operations must maintain records concerning the production, harvesting, and handling of agricultural products that are intended to be sold as organic. What this essentially says is that records need to be maintained by the operation in order to verify nearly every aspect of organic production from start to finish. For livestock operations, that spans all of the regulatory requirements from 205236 to 205242. Those records are audited at each annual mandatory inspection. Details of this will be covered on following slides. While the Organic System Plan is just that, the operations plan for organic management, there must be records maintained to verify the actions taken by the operation were in fact compliant. The certifier will verify you did what you say you did through a thorough review of your records. To continue with the regulations, 205103 continues to outline that the records maintained must, we'll break this down a little bit here. 1. Be adapted to the operation. This means that each record-keeping system will be different. Certifiers can't outline how records should be maintained, but they will ensure all of the applicable compliance information is being recorded during their review and inspection process. 2. Fully disclose all activities and transactions in such a manner that they are readily understood and auditable, and that those records must span from the time of purchase or acquisition through production to the sale or transport of the organic product and be traceable back to the last certified operation. So, start to finish, there needs to be a record of each activity, and those records must be linkable and traceable so that the full supply chain can be audited. Number 3, records must also include audit trail documentation which identify the products to their respective organic category. This reflects audit trail exercises that will be conducted every year by your organic inspector. 4. And all records must be maintained by the operation for no less than 5 years. Pretty self-explanatory. Number 5, the records must also contain sufficient enough information for compliance with all of the pertinent regulations to be verified. This means all details for transactions need to be kept in a file. You can't have too many documents to show your organic inspector. We will detail some of those documents in just a moment. Lastly, the operation must make these records available for inspection and copying during normal business hours. Remember, unannounced inspections can occur, so having records up to date in real time is necessary. That was a lot. So what does all of this mean? We will unpack the requirements seen in this section of the NOP standard on the following slides. Now that we have reviewed the NOP livestock regulations, let's look at a few examples of the records needed to verify compliance with each section. Note that the bulleted list below each citation is by no means an exhaustive list of all the required records. First, taking a look at 205.236, this describes the requirements for origin of livestock. Operations need to be sure their records include an identification system and livestock are being recorded as organic and their respective status is accurately being recorded. This means ear tags or other physical method of identification that translates onto software if you use it, cow cards, or another record-keeping format. It is also important to identify if animals are slaughter eligible as organic. More on that later. Next, sourcing records are needed, which may either be birth or livestock purchase documents if you buy organic replacement heifers or milk cows or breeding stock, for example. This includes a sales record or purchase agreement with all ID numbers listed, an organic certificate of the seller, and a transportation record. If the operation is a new organic dairy producer and transitioning livestock to organic production, those transition practices must be recorded along with ID of those transitioned animals. Any split or parallel producer must be maintaining records that show how contamination and commingling are being prevented. If you have organic and non-organic animals or livestock products, such as milk or meat, records must show the difference between the two. Moving on to 205.237, the livestock feed regulatory requirements are described. Operations must be maintaining feed purchase records or harvest records, and those must include storage and inventory records so your feed can be audited. This includes weight or scale tickets, BOLs if applicable, and invoices or receipts for purchases of feed, like alfalfa, grain, minerals, or other feedstuffs. Those documents must identify the commodity as organic. Be sure to have a current copy of your supplier's organic certificate as well. If any feed is being directly imported, those import records must also be maintained, such as from Canada or overseas. Ration plans are described in the OSP, but the actual as-fed records, including ration fluctuations, must also be maintained. This is an important point. Feed as-fed records are required per the standard at 205.237 D2. I'll quote it here for you. Document the amount of each type of feed actually fed to each type and class of animal. That is pretty clear. The use of any additives or supplements must also have a corresponding record. What was fed to who, when, and how much. Section 205.238 outlines the livestock care and production practice requirements. If any physical alterations are done, such as dehorning or disbudding or castration, for example, there needs to be a record of those practices to ensure the appropriate methods are used, the age of the animal at the time of the procedure was compliant, and all handling practices were also described in the OSP. If inputs were used, they also need to be recorded, such as lidocaine or aspirin. Any healthcare practice must have a record accompanying it. Specifically, all treatment and medication usage must be documented, including the purchase receipt. Even if these were administered by a veterinarian, there must be a record of it to ensure what was given was in fact compliant and outlined in your OSP on your materials list, and that all use restrictions were adhered to. Most importantly, certifiers need to know which animal or animals these were given to and when. Your treatment logbook or other record, if done by a veterinarian, are required to be complete. Now, some materials are allowed with restrictions, and they will have withdrawals for meat and milk. The start and end times of those administrations must be recorded, along with a diversion of milk for sale when that is applicable. At 205.239, we outline the mammalian and non-avian living condition requirements. All material usage there, including sanitizers or pest control products used in housing areas, need to have an associated record. Records of outdoor access need to be maintained. Who got let out, when, and where. If there are any housing rotations or changes from a solo housing to group housing, for calves as an example, records should be kept so that the regulatory requirements for that species can be verified as being met. One example is 6-month-old calves achieving access to pasture during the grazing season. The dates each group graduates need to be recorded. Most importantly here is the requirement for confinement records. There must be a system in place to verify who was confined from the outdoors, for how long and why, especially during the grazing season. Two 205.242 outlines what is required for livestock transport and slaughter. Because slaughtering of livestock requires a handling certification, we will focus on the transport requirements. Transport records must include an individual identification system for the animals being transported, and they must be identified as organic while in transport. All records need to clearly distinguish those that are slaughter eligible as organic and those that are not. Examples are transition cows not born as organic, or cows treated with synthetic parasiticides or other treatments that knocks them out of organic eligibility. For dairies, some animals may be bred and milked as organic, but not slaughtered as organic, if some of those treatments were made. All livestock must be fit for transport, and there needs to be a record verifying this was evaluated for each animal at each transport event. Do you score animals or use an animal welfare guide when loading? Check this box if so. Additionally, there may be some federal or state mandated transport records which must be maintained and verified, such as brand inspection records for interstate travel. Does travel exceed 8 hours or even 28 hours? There must be a record for any practice including feeding or stopover points throughout that transport event that demonstrates continuous organic management throughout. Any stopover points must be certified organic if cows are unloaded at all, and an organic certificate for that site must be in the bundle of documents for the transport event. The same is true of feed fed and bedding used, if it is roughage based, during transport. Going back to 205.103, recall that records must be maintained for all production and handling practices of agricultural products. This would also include all livestock products, such as meat or milk. Any production or processing event must have a corresponding record to verify it occurred. How much milk was produced for sale per day or month, for an example. Or how many coal animals were shipped this month. Again, if the operation is a split or parallel producer, prevention of contamination and commingling records must be maintained, including any use of sanitizers. Depending on the packaging used for livestock products, records may need to be maintained to verify compliant packaging materials were used, when this is applicable. The storage of these livestock products and inventory records must also be maintained so they can be audited. This includes milk pickups or in and out balances of the herd on the herd list. Lastly, the sale of any livestock or livestock products must also be documented. This includes the individual animal ID that was sold, the organic status of the livestock or products, and the slaughter eligibility of any livestock sold. This would also include any certified third-party handlers of your livestock products. A butcher, for example, if you sell organic meat. You need all associated records and the organic certificate of the butcher, labels used, etc., if this is one of your livestock products. Next, in the livestock regulations at 205240, which is the pasture practice standard, and is relevant to ruminant livestock only. There needs to be records that outline grazing and pasture rotations, which groups or classes grazed which fields, and what dates. Operations are also responsible for maintaining the dry matter intake record, which relates to both their as-fed records as well as their grazing and confinement records for each class or group of animals. The inspector will then use these records and verify it against the records used to create it for the grazing season or DMI audit during your annual inspection. Any pasture management practice that is outlined in the OSP, such as reseeding or fertilization, must also have a record associated with it. Again, certifiers will verify what you are doing is consistent with your OSP. So, how do we keep all of these records? It sounds like a lot, and it is. As part of this training, there is a link to some record-keeping templates for livestock operations. While a little dated, they are still a good starting point. You may also ask your certifier if they have any specific templates available. There are many methods of record keeping, so find what works best for you. The good old-fashioned notebook and calendar are often used on modern dairy farms today and presented for audit during the organic inspection. It is best practice to keep backup records if the original is lost. One method is taking photos of some records or notebooks. If you use a whiteboard in the dairy office, perhaps taking pictures or transcribing those weekly or monthly activities is helpful. That way there's a permanent record on hand. There are many types of smartphone apps used for tracking dairy-specific data, along with other common computer software, such as DHIA Plus or DairyComp. However you choose to keep the records is up to you, as long as they are readily available and auditable. Even individual cow cards. Also, be sure to review the record-keeping section of your OSP, or Organic System Plan, which should describe in detail the types of records you keep. Update this section as needed when changes occur to your operation or new forms of record-keeping are utilized. Thank you for participating in this training, and I hope you have found these explanations valuable. Organic record-keeping practices for livestock operations can be complex and voluminous, but getting the right start on developing a complete system will help you maintain compliance throughout the year and for years to come. Thank you also to the Organic Center for supporting the creation of this training and associated resources.